worked for Jim McGoffin at Barrow, and I was going to make a lot more money than I would at Reeves. And I flew 180s on wheels and skis, and I flew Copilot at 60 volts, which is C46, and also Copilot in DC3s. And I started flying the Norseman as soon as I could on floats, 725 easy, and I ended up going out to Aluktuk Point one day, and I had a lady whose husband was working at bar at POW C, and I had a whole bunch of scaffolding, and we were just flying along at about 900 feet, and just underneath some overcast, and the visibility was real good. And the little boy, he was about 2 years old, he pushed the white fuel pressure warning light a couple of times. About 3 times he pushed it, and then the light came on, and something clicked and didn't click in my mind, and then the engine started sputtering, and I switched tanks and pulled the throttle back and started pumping the wobble pump like crazy. And about 400 feet, I got the engine running. But a Norseman on floats is a big chunk of iron when it wants to come out of the sky very, very quickly. So then they sent me over to Barrier Island to fly out of there. And the boss of Puget Sound and Drake, his name was Howie Clatty. And it was the 4th of July of '56. And Howie wanted to go fishing, and the chief cook for the dew line on the Alaska section was there, and so I ended up putting 4 or 5 people in the Norseman and taking off from the lagoon there at Barrier Island and going up to Schrader Peters Lake. And this was the 4th of July, and there were still big chunks of ice floating around in Schrader Lake on the 4th of July. But anyway, I taxied over to a bank that was a real good deep cutoff on the east side of the lake, and I had some 25-pound tests on my spinning reel, and I started fishing with a number 2 Daredevil, and I caught a big lake trout, and it weighed 37 pounds when we got back to Barrier Island, which was about 3 or 4 hours later. And Howie Clatter hollered over at me, "You catch another one like that, Peter, you're going to have to stay here." That fish was probably 70 or 80 years old. But the airplane needed a 100-hour, and it was the 26th day of July. And here come Mickey McDougall and Joe Pete, Jr., 2 Yupik boys, Eskimo from Bethel boys, A&P mechanics. And they went down to the airplane and started taking the inspection covers off the bottoms of the wings and looking in the tail. And Mickey reached underneath there with his dikes and cut the wire on the oil plug and pulled the wire off, and did like everybody did in 1956, just open the plug and let the oil run out. Well, when they got through with the inspection, the plug was back in, they didn't have any oil. And I sat there for 2 days, and Jerry Flint come along with 60 volts, and I got on 60 volts, and I came to town, and I went up with my letter to George Raybert, and I said, and George sent me over to Dick King, and Dick King hired me on the 1st of August, and because he'd hired Joe Cross on the 31st of July, and he says, "I'm not going to have 2 pilots on the seniority list with the same date of hire." So I went to work for the company.